Okay, so the second part I would like to talk about is my perspective as a realtor. What has been effective, what is effective for me in conveying the message? And I call this minding the gap. You might recognize this from the tube in London. So when you're stepping over the gap into the train, you gotta be careful that you don't fall through the gap. And right now, a lot of us are falling through the gap. And another word for this is dissonance. So there's two types of gaps. One is, do the people understand and believe the science? What's the gap in knowledge? And that's part of what I'm talking about. But the other part is people already understand it, they know it, they're aware of it, but they're just not acting. Why not? Why is there a gap between what people want to do and what they're doing? And we're all guilty of it. I mean, we're all guilty of it. I should diet, but I'm not. I should exercise, but I'm not. I should turn the tap off, but I don't. All of these things. What is the understanding of that dissonance? So for here, it's important to understand the difference between core wants and needs versus defense mechanisms. Core wants and needs are not the same as defense mechanisms. Core wants and needs are things like subsistence, belonging, recognition, and achievement. Those down deep, fundamental needs that we all have. Pain results when our core wants and needs are not met, and the inner pain is manifest by feelings. And what my job is as a realtor is to understand the defense mechanisms that shield that vulnerable core inner side, but address the core vulnerable inside. And we develop defense mechanisms to alleviate that pain. So what are some core needs and desires? Pleasure, beauty, and joy. Fundamental. Everybody needs, wants pleasure, beauty, and joy. Now, these might be psychologically known, or they might be completely subconscious, but it doesn't matter. We need to understand that that's what their fundamental needs are. Control. We want to be in control of our lives. We don't want government or business to be controlling our lives and telling us what to do. Belonging. People really need a sense of belonging. My sister recently married a Brit, moved to England, recently got her citizenship, and she was ecstatic. She was just ecstatic because she now has a citizenship in England. Thinking, why? It's because there's a fundamental need to belong, to be liked, to be listened to be heard, just to feel part of the community, fundamental. And achievement. So we all want to achieve something. It's a fundamental need. It's Maslow's hierarchy. We're moving up a little bit, but it's still a fundamental need. I'm going to repeat them. Pleasure, beauty, and joy. Control. Belonging. Achievement. Now there's many more, but this is an example. The point is, what's the core need? So our inner pains, when you don't meet these inner needs, I'm going to give you 3 layers. Now there's a million of them. I'm going to give 3 layers that make sense to me. So if you're not being heard, if things are out of your control, if you're not facing beauty, you have anything from anxiety all the way up to fear. Or helplessness and despair. So last year I got a master's degree in sustainability in Sweden. And I wrote my master's paper on, can the construction industry in Ghana, Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, become more sustainable? And one of my classmates was from Ghana. So he and I flew down to Ghana. And we asked the question, can this construction industry be more sustainable? And then the fundamental question is, what are you doing, what are you not doing, and whose responsibility is it? And time after time, what we heard was, it's the government's responsibility. It was finger pointing, not mine, because they feel completely out of control. Because the government, that's their attitude, whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter. That's their attitude. And they feel helpless, and they would say to me, literally, but there's nothing we can do about it. You gotta love the dogs. Guilt and shame, I'm not doing enough to solve the problem. And what my Ghanaian classmate said to me when I posed this question, if you tell me that you have a mosquito bite, and I ask you, what's the problem? Most people would automatically say what? It itches. One of my friends said it could be malaria or West Nile virus. It's another problem. My friend Jenny, who's adorable, from Sweden, very spiritual, said, it's not a problem. It's only a problem if you think it's a problem. And Kwaku said, what were you doing there in the first place? Really, it took me a year to understand what that meant. And what it meant was, there's a certain amount of shame of, I'm not doing enough to improve my country. And it's a recognition and admission of guilt and shame. Now those are the core needs, those are the core feelings. We, to protect ourselves, build defense mechanisms. Ignorance, apathy, and you all know what these are. Not knowing, not caring, avoiding the situation, denying it's a problem, low prioritization, transference. Everybody's pointing fingers at somebody else saying, it's not my responsibility, it's Larry's responsibility, it's Shemp's responsibility, it's Mo's responsibility, and nothing gets done. Rationalization, well, they're doing the best they can. I heard that over and over again in Ghana. They're doing the best they can. It's the defense mechanism to protect from their inner sense of helplessness or guilt or shame. And resignation is just, there's nothing we can do about it. Now, if we're trying to convey our message, it's important to understand the difference between core needs and defense mechanisms. Because what we're really asking the public to do by educating themselves, or taking responsibility, or taking action, or caring, is to say, please remove your defense mechanism and leave them at the door. We need to do that. They need to recognize that they're in denial, that they don't know. They need to do that. But it's extremely dangerous if you leave it at that, because it opens, what you're asking people to do is expose themselves to their core inner pain, which they are not willing to do. So, breaking through the resistance, either because it's denial or because it's dissonance, it's a two-part process. The first part of it is to address the defense mechanisms. The antidote to apathy is inspiration. The antidote to avoidance is repetition. The antidote to denial is evidence. The antidote to ignorance is education. The antidote to low prioritization is urgency, relevance, and importance. The antidote to transference is to take responsibility. The antidote to rationalization is appeal to logic. And the antidote to resignation is to inspire and give hope. We need to do this. This is what most messaging does, but it's also where a lot of messaging stops. And if it stops there, you're going to build more resistance, not less. No matter how many charts you show them, you're going to build more resistance because you're not addressing their inner fears. So, to address their inner fears is part 2. And here I'm going to talk a little bit about what we can do as a public that can be effective. So if the inner need is pleasure and joy, find an activity, a project that protects their inner need, that not only protects it, but makes it blossom. So Janine Benyus's biomimicry is really effective because it touches on pleasure and joy. It's beautiful. Does everybody know what biomimicry is? Okay. Does anybody not know what biomimicry is? So this is a type of action that builds products and technology based on the imitation of nature. So the bullet trains in Japan have a pointy nose because they emulate that of it's not a heron, that's a kingfisher, but a heron, because it brings down the resistance. It makes the trains more effective. There's a million examples like that, and it's become a whole industry. But it's effective because it builds on the inner need of joy and pleasure. It's beautiful, it's creative, it's imaginative, and it's inspiring. Citizens Climate Lobby and Marine Clean Energy, the first CCA in California, are effective not because of all the technical reasons that people say, oh yes, we're going to bring down CO2. They're really effective because it makes people feel in control. There is something we can do about it. And the technology that's coming out, like Elon Musk's Powerwall, which is a battery that goes with the solar and creates energy that you can use even after the sun goes down, is truly effective because it shows a sense of achievement. Whether it's personal or corporate or communal, it's I've accomplished something, and that is inspiring. And that's what we're trying to get at. So one of my guiding principles as a salesperson, as a realtor, is I start from a point of view of don't ask the question, I'm asking the question, what am I selling? What I'm starting with is, what are you buying? And it completely flips the conversation on its head. Because what I'm selling is, I need to make a commission. That doesn't go very far. What we're selling is, we need to bring down CO2 emissions. That's our story. It may or may not be the audience's story. But if you flip it and say, what are you buying? We're asking, what's important to you? What's really asking is, what brings you joy and pleasure? What makes you feel in control? And what gives you personal achievement? So when discussing solutions, don't talk about pain. Talk about how the solution satisfies the core inner needs of pleasure, joy, belonging, and control, and achievement. And then say, how's that working for you? Thank you.